The party ended the way most good evenings do, not with a big moment but with small goodbyes, coats pulled on in a hurry, leftover laughter hanging in the air like warmth that refused to leave right away, and Emily stood near the front door smiling politely as friends thanked her for the food, the music, the comfort of her home, and she nodded, said kind words back, and watched them step into the cool night one by one, cars starting, headlights fading, until the street outside grew quiet again. And only then did she let her shoulders drop as the weight of hosting finally lifted, the house suddenly too silent after hours of noise, cups left on tables, soft music still playing low in the background, and as she turned to walk back inside, already thinking about cleaning and how tired she felt, she noticed someone still there, someone she had not expected to see standing alone near the kitchen counter, and for a second she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, but then she recognized him clearly, Daniel, her husband's closest friend, the one who had known him since college, the one who always helped without being asked, the one who listened more than he spoke, and he stood there holding an empty glass, looking around as if deciding whether he should leave or stay, and Emily paused, surprised but not uncomfortable, and said softly that it seemed everyone else had gone, and Daniel smiled in a calm, careful way and replied that he hadn't realized how late it was, offering to head out if she wanted, but Emily shook her head without thinking, telling him it was fine, that he didn't need to rush, and in that simple moment something shifted, because the house felt different now, not loud and social, but quiet and personal, and the space between them felt more noticeable, like a pause in a song that makes you suddenly aware of every sound around you, and Emily walked toward the kitchen, picking up plates and cups, moving with purpose, not wanting to think too much about why Daniel's presence felt heavier than it should, while he followed her, asking if he could help, and she said yes, grateful for the company even if she didn't fully understand why, and they began clearing the table together, moving quickly, almost in sync, not repeating instructions, just knowing what needed to be done, and as they worked, Emily became aware of how quiet Daniel was, not awkwardly quiet, but thoughtful, as if he was holding back words, and she found herself wanting him to speak, to fill the silence, and when he finally did, he commented on how well the evening had gone, how welcoming the house always felt, and Emily thanked him, brushing it off as something she always did, but inside she felt a small ache, because she tried hard to make everything perfect, often without anyone noticing the effort behind it, and Daniel noticed, and that awareness made her chest tighten in a way she wasn't prepared for, and she told herself it was nothing, just tiredness, just the end of a long day, and they moved into the kitchen where the light was softer, the noise lower, the world smaller, and as Emily rinsed plates, Daniel dried them, standing closer than before, not touching, but close enough that she could sense him there, and she became aware of small details, like the sound of his breathing, the way he focused on what he was doing, the calm energy he carried, and she wondered briefly why this moment felt more important than it should, and she pushed the thought away, reminding herself that he was just her husband's friend, nothing more, and yet the quiet made room for thoughts she usually kept buried, thoughts about how often she felt unseen in her own life, how often she smiled and nodded and moved on without sharing what she really felt, and as if reading her mind, Daniel spoke again, saying that she had a way of making people feel at ease, that not everyone could do that, and Emily paused, water running over her hands, and she thanked him again, but this time her voice was softer, more real, and she turned to look at him, meeting his eyes for a brief second that lasted just a little too long, long enough for both of them to realize that this was no longer just polite conversation, and Daniel looked away first, clearing his throat, stepping back slightly as if to create distance, and the movement reminded Emily of a line that shouldn't be crossed, and she felt both relieved and disappointed by that reminder, and they continued cleaning, faster now, as if speed could erase the tension that had quietly settled between them. And when the kitchen was finally clean, Emily leaned against the counter, suddenly unsure of what to do next, because the night felt unfinished, like a sentence cut short, and Daniel checked his watch, saying he should probably go, but he didn't move right away, and Emily nodded, agreeing, yet neither of them made any effort to end the moment, and the silence stretched again, filled with thoughts neither of them spoke. And Emily realized that something small but important had begun, not an action, not a choice, but a feeling, and feelings, she knew, could be dangerous even when nothing happened, and as Daniel finally picked up his jacket, thanking her once more for the evening, Emily smiled and told him to drive safely, watching him walk toward the door, and just before he stepped outside, he turned back and looked at her, not with longing, not with intent, but with understanding, the kind that makes you feel exposed. And in that look Emily saw the beginning of something she wasn't ready to name, something that would not disappear just because the house had grown quiet again, and when the door closed behind him, the silence felt different than before, heavier, fuller, and Emily stood alone in the living room, realizing that the night had ended, but a question had quietly begun. The kitchen was quiet now, the clinking of dishes and the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sounds as Emily and Daniel moved around each other with ease, their actions almost instinctive. Washing, drying, and stacking without speaking at first, but the silence felt charged, like a space waiting for something to happen, and Daniel finally broke it, his voice low and steady, complimenting Emily on how warm and welcoming her home always felt, and she smiled, brushing it off as politeness, but inside, her heart thumped in a way she hadn't expected, noticing the sincerity behind his words, and she responded with a soft thank you, realizing how rare it was to feel truly seen, even in the small details of life, the way someone notices the effort you put into making things perfect. And Daniel continued carefully, commenting on how much people cared about her, and Emily paused, her hands in the sink, feeling the words sink deeper than they should, a quiet warmth spreading through her chest that made her aware of the tension between them, and she tried to focus on the dishes, on the mundane task, but Daniel's eyes kept catching hers, gentle and attentive, filled with a kind of honesty that was hard to ignore, and he spoke again, softer now, almost hesitant, about how he had noticed she sometimes seemed lonely despite being surrounded by friends and family, and Emily swallowed, her throat tight, feeling exposed yet comforted, because it wasn't a criticism, but a truth she had hidden even from herself, and she responded carefully, saying that loneliness didn't always mean being alone, that sometimes it was a quiet ache inside, a feeling that went unseen by most, and Daniel nodded, listening with a patience that made her heart ache in new ways, and they continued cleaning, but now their movements were slower, more aware of each other, their hands brushing occasionally, the smallest gestures carrying more meaning than words could, and the air between them seemed charged with thoughts unspoken, emotions hovering at the edge, both aware that this conversation was deeper than any they had shared before, about life, about moments missed, about watching time slip by without saying what needed to be said. And Emily felt her chest tighten, realizing how much she had been craving to be understood, to be truly seen for who she was beyond the smiles and polite conversation, and Daniel's presence made that ache both soothing and dangerous, because it stirred feelings she hadn't admitted, feelings of longing and connection that went beyond friendship, and yet, he was careful, never stepping too close, never crossing a line, but the sincerity in his voice, the gentle way he acknowledged her, made the air thick with tension, the kind that leaves you aware of every sound, every breath, every heartbeat, and Emily found herself stealing small glances at him, noticing the curve of his smile, the way his eyes softened when he spoke about small things, like the way a house could feel alive when someone cared for it, and she realized she was hanging on to every word, every pause, feeling drawn in despite herself, the longing growing quietly, the attraction subtle but undeniable. And Daniel noticed, too, though he never acted on it, never let the words go further than honesty, never let his eyes linger too long, and they both understood the unspoken rule between them. Feelings could exist without actions, emotions could be acknowledged without crossing boundaries, and still, the heart would notice, would ache, would respond, and as they moved to the living room to stack chairs and put away leftovers, the silence returned, but this time it was filled with thoughts, the weight of everything unspoken, the tenderness of the moment, and the awareness of what could have been, and when Daniel finally paused to straighten a cushion, he looked at Emily with a softness that made her stomach flutter, and she felt herself wanting to speak, to say something, anything, but words failed her, trapped by politeness, restraint, and the unspoken understanding that this moment was fragile, fleeting, and precious, and as the last of the dishes were placed on the counter, and Emily dried her hands, she realized that the evening had become more than cleaning and conversation, it had become an intimate exchange of recognition, of honesty, of the way two people can feel deeply connected without touching, without acting, and Daniel finally sighed, a small, quiet sound, acknowledging the end of the evening while leaving the moment suspended, both aware that what had passed between them could not be undone, could not be ignored, but also could not change what was necessary in their lives, and as they moved to turn off the lights, the house felt warmer, more alive, yet heavy with emotion, their hearts silently speaking to each other, feelings hovering like whispers in the air, and Emily understood then that some nights linger not because of events, but because of the emotions that quietly stir inside you, the longings that remain unfulfilled, the closeness that leaves an imprint on your heart. And as Daniel finally reached for his coat, she felt a pang of something she couldn't name, a mixture of gratitude, longing, and awareness that the night had shown her a truth she hadn't expected, that connection could exist quietly, deeply, and without words. And as he stepped toward the door, they exchanged one last look, brief but full of meaning, and Emily knew the evening would stay with her, not in moments of action, but in moments of feeling, a gentle reminder of the power of understanding, the pull of emotions, and the beauty of hearts meeting in quiet recognition. Even when nothing more could happen, Emily poured tea into two delicate cups, the steam curling between them like invisible threads, and she handed one to Daniel, their fingers brushing for the briefest moment, sending a subtle shock through both of them, and Daniel's eyes met hers, holding a weight that neither had expected to feel, a mixture of respect, longing, and an unspoken connection that had been building quietly all evening. And Emily felt her chest tighten as she realized just how complicated her emotions had become, how drawn she was to someone she knew she shouldn't be. And yet the conversation that followed was gentle, careful, filled with honesty and restraint, as Daniel spoke quietly about boundaries, about respecting her life and her marriage, about feelings that existed but could not be acted upon, and Emily listened, her hands wrapped around the warm cup, feeling a mix of relief and ache, knowing he was right but wishing he wasn't, wishing that circumstances could be different, and she admitted softly that she too felt a pull, a recognition of something deep and rare. Something that had nothing to do with infidelity and everything to do with being seen and understood, and they both acknowledged that what they shared was dangerous not in a physical sense but in the emotional intimacy that had grown quietly over the evening, the closeness that made words heavier and glances linger longer. And Daniel leaned slightly back, his expression gentle yet serious, explaining that sometimes the strongest emotions are those that remain unspoken, that love and attraction can exist without crossing lines, and Emily felt tears prick her eyes, not from guilt, but from the realization of how deeply she had been yearning for understanding, for connection, for someone who could recognize her heart without judgment, and she whispered that she didn't want to be someone she wasn't, didn't want to act on feelings that could complicate her life, and Daniel nodded, his own emotions held in check, his voice steady but soft, affirming that she was brave and honest, that she was someone who felt deeply and that such depth of feeling was rare and beautiful. And as they sipped their tea in silence, the air between them heavy with unspoken emotion, Emily noticed the way Daniel's eyes softened whenever he looked at her, the way his presence seemed to fill the room without a word, and she realized that the evening had shifted something inside her, made her more aware of the quiet yearnings she had ignored, the moments she had let pass without recognition. And Daniel, too, seemed aware, moving with care, speaking with intention, never crossing a boundary yet never retreating entirely, their connection palpable, each word and gesture carrying weight. And when he finally reached for his coat, the gesture felt like a punctuation mark on an emotional sentence they had both been writing all evening, a recognition that what existed between them was real but needed to remain restrained. And Emily felt a mix of longing and gratitude, understanding that sometimes the most profound bonds are those that cannot be acted upon, that the heart can recognize truth without changing circumstances. And as Daniel stood by the door, ready to leave, he turned once more, meeting her gaze with a quiet intensity that said everything they could not voice aloud, a reminder that connection, honesty, and emotional intimacy can exist without physical action. And Emily watched him go, the door closing softly behind him, leaving the room full of the lingering warmth of shared understanding, the ache of what could never happen, and the gentle, undeniable proof that hearts can meet in ways words cannot fully capture, that love sometimes lives in restraint, in acknowledgement, in quiet appreciation of what is felt but not acted upon. And as she set down her empty cup, Emily felt the weight of the evening settle over her, heavy yet comforting, a mixture of melancholy and hope, knowing that such moments, fleeting and impossible as they might be, leave marks on the soul that last far longer than any conversation, any gesture, or any ordinary day. and she realized that the most romantic acts are sometimes the ones that never cross lines, that honor life, loyalty, and deep emotion all at once. And sitting alone, she let herself feel the beauty of the evening, the tension, the unspoken attraction, and the gentle lesson that hearts can connect, heal, and understand each other, even when circumstance demands restraint, leaving her with a quiet ache and a warmth that would stay with her long. After the night ended, the soft click of the door echoed through the quiet house, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts, the air suddenly heavy and still after the emotional intensity of the evening, and she stood in the living room for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the wind outside, realizing that something significant had passed between her and Daniel, something unspoken yet deeply felt, and though no lines had been crossed, she felt a shift within herself, a subtle awareness of desires, understanding, and emotional connection that she had long buried beneath routines and responsibilities. And as she walked slowly toward the window, looking out at the quiet street and the lingering shadows of the departing guests, she reflected on the honesty, restraint, and depth of their conversation, how they had shared parts of themselves that were rarely shown to anyone, how words and glances had carried more meaning than actions ever could, and she understood that human hearts can connect in ways that are invisible but powerful, that attraction and respect, longing and restraint, can coexist in the same space, creating a tension that is as beautiful as it is fragile. And Emily felt a mixture of relief and melancholy, a quiet ache that came from recognizing something true yet unattainable, from acknowledging emotions that could not disrupt the life she had chosen yet demanded recognition, and she sat down near the window, letting herself feel the warmth of the tea she had forgotten to finish, feeling the echo of Daniel's presence linger in the corners of the room, his voice and eyes replaying in her mind, the honesty and gentleness of him making her heart both lighter and heavier, and she realized how much the evening had revealed about herself, her need for understanding, her craving to be seen and valued beyond the surface of polite conversation, and she thought about the moments when their hands brushed, the way his attention had felt like recognition of her inner self, the way he had spoken of her heart with care. And it struck her that emotional intimacy could be as powerful as romantic gestures, that connections do not always need to be acted upon to leave a lasting impression, and as she reflected on their conversation, she understood that their restraint was not a loss but a form of respect, a demonstration of loyalty to her life, her marriage, and the boundaries she valued, and in that understanding, Emily felt a sense of quiet empowerment, knowing that her heart could feel deeply, that it could recognize beauty, honesty, and longing without succumbing to impulsive choices, and she acknowledged the truth that love comes in many forms, sometimes as fleeting awareness, sometimes as unspoken connection, sometimes as moments that teach you about yourself without changing the path you walk. And she thought about Daniel, imagining his walk home, wondering if he, too, felt the weight of what had passed between them, and she smiled softly, realizing that their bond, however delicate and restrained, had gifted her a sense of being truly understood, truly seen, a gift that was rare and precious. And the night stretched on around her, calm and quiet, the house finally settling into stillness, yet her mind and heart were wide awake, replaying small glances, soft words, unspoken confessions, and the gentle pull of attraction balanced by respect. And Emily understood that these moments, though brief and restrained, leave marks that last, shaping the way we feel, the way we see ourselves, and the way we approach life and relationships. And as she stood to turn off the lights, she felt a mixture of melancholy and hope, knowing that connection could exist without action, that longing could be beautiful without guilt, and that the night had given her something profound, the proof that hearts can meet in quiet, emotional intimacy, that feelings can exist fully without disrupting life, and that staying true to oneself and to one's commitments can be the most romantic, most powerful act of all. And with that thought, Emily climbed the stairs, leaving the quiet house behind, carrying with her the memory of a night that would linger in her heart, the knowledge of what it felt like to be seen, valued, and quietly loved. And she smiled through the bittersweet ache, realizing that sometimes the deepest connections are the ones we never touch, the ones we honor with restraint, understanding, and quiet appreciation. And as she closed the bedroom door, the house settled into stillness, but her heart remained awake, full, and profoundly aware of the beauty of what had passed.